probably why everyone signed up for this session anyway, was just to see a couple of examples of what we get here at the city, and maybe how we go through our process for doing a site plan review. So let's jump into our residential subdivision example. This is a pretty typical example of what is happening here in Walla Walla and has been for the last couple of years. So we're experiencing quite a bit of growth, just like everyone is, probably over here on the east side. And when that happens, it typically happens into the areas where was once farmland, agricultural area. So the example we're going to talk about today is a 15.2 acre project site that was proposed, and I think it was probably 5 or so years ago. Proposed, reviewed, and constructed. And I thought we'd just take some steps through what we saw and as was brought into us, and then maybe open it up to the group to hear what they have to say about this type of example, and how it compares to what they see, and maybe what they would be wanting to see as far as the proposal was concerned. So so in a nutshell, here is I've got the project area outlined in red. We have it's actually just north of Highway 12 here in town, with a arterial collector street that is its frontage. I also, in blue here, sort of highlighted the semi-annual or ephemeral stream that actually flows through the site. If you were to go out there and look at this today, or even during even before the project came in, you wouldn't see very much. I mean, this is basically a wheat field with some low spots that's running through it, and it would probably only have flow in it during our heaviest events. So, but what I will let you know about is that, and it's not shown here on this slide or in the example, but just to the west of this site here, on what is called Iris Lane here, there is a culvert that exists. It's private, but there is a culvert that's underneath that lane, and that does convey stormwater further to the west across the property, which is in the UGA. So there was a bit of concern from these downstream property owners, just because of the fact that we're going from something that was completely agricultural upstream of them to something that was a neighborhood. So what was proposed here was basically single family residential neighborhood with city-owned streets, and then city-owned infrastructure, water, sewer, and storm drainage. So the city already had water mains that were located in Middle Waitsburg Road that were a frontage to the site. So this was going to be an extension of water and sewer through this neighborhood to provide them with those services. Okay. Kind of the important things to note here, which I always look for whenever I'm looking at these proposals for the first time, is how did they characterize, or what is the soil, and how did they characterize it out there? So the report that they turned in was not a full geotechnical report. It was a report where they went out and did test pits on the site. So, and it was characterized as silt and sand in the ML characterization. So, and then the depth of groundwater, which is kind of important in these types of developments, because typically the depth of groundwater is pretty deep, but never know. I mean, that's why you have to do checking around. And so what they brought into us was basically an estimation of a 40 to 50 feet below the ground surface. And that was based on ecology well log database information. So, and I'm not sure how other jurisdictions do it, but the way we do it here at the city is when that type of information is brought in, we typically require it to be in a location that is within about 400 to 500 feet of the subject site. So we don't allow a proponent to come in and say, well, I'm going to characterize the depth to groundwater as from some well log that's say 1,000 feet away, for example, or 2,000 feet away. It's just a little bit too far away for us here. So we like to keep whatever information that they bring in to be somewhat closer, as close as possible to the actual project. So, and then the last thing was the proposed average daily traffic count. So it was characterized as low by the engineer that turned in the report. The thing that I noted that I didn't like what I saw when I saw it is that he didn't actually quote any didn't quote any actual numbers or calculations in his report. So it's not that I disagreed with them on this. I probably would agree that the count was low, but in hindsight, I would have requested some sort of backup information or calculations be done and presented in the report to let us know. Now, interesting point on this, which you'll see as we kind of get into this, the city required them to put some drainage infrastructure in Middle Waitsburg Road out here as part of the project. They had to do some frontage improvements along this road, which we also required them to put drainage in as well. If this road would have been a road that had a high ADT count, then they would have had to put, there would have been a little bit of a difference here in what they would have been doing, because although their project site may have been a low ADT count, the road where they were doing improvements on was actually, if it were, would have been a higher count. And so therefore they may have had to provide a different amount of treatment for that. So just something to point out, and I'm sure most jurisdictions are aware of this, but just because the site itself may fall into the low category, if you're requiring them to do some kind of improvements on a road that is adjacent, that has a higher ADT count, and that trips the level for some sort of extra BMP, you should be aware of that and make that really clear to the proponents as they come in, because we hear this a lot from folks who say, well, you know, it's my site, it's a neighborhood, it's low, why do I have to do anything extra? And the answer is very clear. It's located in the manual, the stormwater manual, and I'm pretty sure Doug pointed this out as well as I did yesterday. The BMPs have to be sized for the amount of runoff that's sent to them. So if those ADT counts are higher, we have to treat that water a little bit differently. This was one of the things that was presented in the report with the property. Kind of hard to see on the slide, but these were the locations of the test pits that were done out there to find out to characterize what the soil was on the site. And one thing I'll kind of point out to you here is these were not necessarily located where the BMPs were proposed by the engineer when they were doing the proposal. So as a sort of a, not a spoiler alert, but in the future or in your jurisdiction, you may actually want to ask folks to be a little bit more precise about where they do their soil characterization or do their test pits. Okay, so the comment in the chat was, has there been any flooding or was anything put in where the stream goes through to prevent flooding? I think is the question. And the answer is, to the city's knowledge, no. There was not flooding that was occurring out here prior to the proposal of this development. So this was, like I said, this was just a ephemeral stream that didn't even look like a stream if you looked at it. It was basically a low spot in the wheat field that drained from west to east. There was a culvert that was put in under the road because that was the natural drainage that had been occurring through there, but it hadn't been a problem in the past. So if that was your question, then the answer is no, it wasn't. Based on what we talked about yesterday, as far as the project tiers, I think it's pretty obvious that if you were to go through the either the flowcharts that are in the Eastern Washington Manual or our handbook, which I showed you yesterday, this is going to fall out as being a project that's considered a large project. Okay, so you've got a 15-acre site here. I believe there's roughly about 3.5 to 4 acres of impervious surface that's it constitutes the streets, the bulb ends, and then there's a small pullout area in on one side of the loop there. So it definitely falls into the tier of a larger project. Okay, but at this point, I think this is where most of our proponents, when they come in, they tend to stand at that crossroads of what we were discussing about yesterday, which is like, okay, what do I have to include here? All right, am I going to do all the core elements, or am I going to fall under the UIC rule? Okay, and they had made a decision on this proposed site to take care of their stormwater via infiltration galleries. So UIC infiltration galleries. That was what they were proposing to do. So unfortunately, when they brought their stormwater report in, they went through all of the core elements, which wasn't a bad idea. It's actually a good idea, but they forgot about looking at some of the site suitability criteria. And so in looking back over that, I think that's something that the city probably should have noted to them and said, well, yes, you've gone out, you've characterized the soil on the site, and yes, you're showing us calculations that possibly would show us that you can handle the stormwater runoff from the site. You know, you've got to consider these. You got to run through the site suitability criteria as well, and that wasn't explicitly done in the stormwater report whenever it came in. So we did discuss this with the proponent during the review of it, but we never required them to go back and correct their stormwater report to actually explicitly go through those kind of things. So this is something that in your jurisdiction, maybe you take care of this. I hope you do. In ours, we're trying to correct that now. So we struggle with this a lot because we have a lot of proponents that come in, they go right through the core elements. They're actually doing proposing UICs on the site, and we have to stop them and say, hold on a second, you need to go look at section 5.6 of the manual and follow those rules and explicitly show us how you're conforming to those rules in the manual. Core elements are great, thank you very much, but if you're not proposing to put in any sort of other treatment BMPs, then you're slightly barking up the wrong tree. This is kind of the point at which, when you're looking at the blank canvas as far as a proposed site like this, there are a lot of issues that are brought to the table that typically aren't in a stormwater report. Okay, so usually before that report is done, there's some sort of pre-application meeting. The proponent comes in, talks to the development services people, the engineering folks, and he says, look, I want to put in a development. Okay, I want to build some houses out here. I want to put in city streets. They find out whether or not that proposed site can be served by water and sewer. In this case, it can. That starts to form the development picture, if you will, for the site, because now you're starting to look at things that are like, how many lots can I put out here on this site, right? Okay, so what is possible? And as any developer will tell you, the more homes in a residential subdivision they can put in, the more money they're going to be able to make, which makes it more profitable, right? So they're going to try to get in there as much as they possibly can, because that's what they're trying to do. I think this is also the point at which the city needs to express to the developer what they feel is most important to them. All right, because this is going to be a city street. It is going to have city infrastructure in it. And the point here is that I was trying to make to folks is, if your development services requirements are, it's got to be a street, it's got to be a curb and gutter, and many times there are sort of guidelines or whatever on, say, the width of the city right of way, for example. So sometimes those standards say it's got to be 60 feet wide, for example. This is where typically developers come in and they try to negotiate with the city. And they basically try to come in and say, well, you know what, instead of 60 feet, I'd like to propose a 50-foot wide width to the right of way, because I realize that it's going to mean it's a narrower street, but I can show you that fire trucks and emergency vehicles can still enter the site safely and turn around. I can show you that all of your infrastructure can be put in with the proper separation distances. And I can show you that we can still put everything else in there as far as utilities are concerned, phone, cable TV, whatever your infrastructure requirement is. But I'm also going to be able to have more room to put more lots in. Therefore, this is what I'd like to do. Okay. So in this instance, I just want folks to kind of think about this from the point of view of, when you're looking at the subject property in this sense, the city is looking at it from one point of view on their side of the table. The proponent is looking at it from the other point of view on their side of the table. And that is, they're trying to get as much in there as they can. And I think this is the point at which the jurisdictions need to be having the discussions with the proponents to say, hey, look, we have the knowledge base to know that we have some problems out here, for example, if they exist, or we have other developments that are similar to this. We have some maintenance issues. What you're proposing to put in is hard infrastructure. It includes UIC galleries, for example, if it does, pipes and catch basins. And that's just not something that we can take on at this point, maybe, who knows? So these are the types of discussions that are really important up front between you, the proponent, between you and your maintenance team, for example. Just as a note, we here at the city of Walla Walla, this was a rather small subdivision that was proposed back when it came in. We're now entertaining proposals for subdivisions that are on the level of, say, 250 to 300 homes. We have at least 3 of those that are on board right now. So in the next couple of years, just like in many of your jurisdictions, these proposals to develop are going to be coming in, and these are going to be huge hits to your maintenance department, because there's going to be way more catch basins, way more pipes, way more things for them to be inspected, maintained, and taken care of. So just something to think about. If you remember the core elements, core element number 4, preserve natural drainage systems. This was really important for us to make sure that this development it did preserve this natural drainage system. We felt like that they needed to do that. And so that was a requirement for them, that they had to provide some sort of system through there that conveyed whatever water that was going to be coming from upstream through the site safely and on to the downstream area. The other thing that we wanted assurances from them on was that we would not be causing any flooding or any erosion or anything else to the downstream properties here because of this. So yes, that was something that and one of the reasons why I picked this specifically was this example was that we wanted to make sure that they maintained that, and they did. What is the current stormwater facility in the existing roadway? There was nothing in the roadway. So there was no stormwater other than there was a ditch that was located on the south side of Middle Waitsburg Road over here. The ditch was actually probably constructed to take runoff from the WashDOT highway that was here. It did probably take a little bit of flow coming off of Waitsburg Road, but there was essentially nothing that was in that road that was there and functioning. So that was one of the reasons why we requested that these guys do some frontage improvements and put in some drainage there. To calculate runoff for residential lots, do different jurisdictions consider the lots fully impervious, or do they assume lots have, as a rule of thumb, 50% pervious, 50% impervious, or do they have other assumptions on pervious impervious ratio? Great question. And I can explain what the city of Walla Walla does, and I'm sure you guys have other thoughts on this, and if you want to talk about it afterwards, that's perfectly fine. So what we do here what we have been doing here at the city in the past is we've been assuming basically a 25% of the lot, based on the final grading, of course. 25% of that lot is basically going to drain to the drainage system that's located in the city street. So we sort of take into account the fact that in this case, it would be the front driveways and sidewalks are all going to contribute runoff to our system that's in the street. We have the developer size that accordingly. Okay. Starting probably just shortly after this project at the city, what we decided to do is we decided to do something a little bit different, and that was have residential developments like this take into account infiltration of the areas that were on the lots, infiltrating those on the lots themselves if they possibly could. So for example, if these lots out here we're going to have single family resident homes on them, they would have to show us an estimate of what the size of the house was going to be and what the amount of impervious surface was going to be. And then what we asked them to do was come up with a sort of a basic calculation that would provide infiltration on site for that amount of impervious surface. For example, in other residential neighborhoods that we've had, we had them run the calculations, and it came up that for every 10,000 or every 1,000 square foot of impervious surface that they had, as far as roof was concerned, they would have to put in 10 linear feet of some sort of infiltration trench that was located either in the front of the house or the back of the house or in the side yard if they could fit it in. But as long as it did not impact the adjacent properties and it did not cause any kind of problems grade wise for the foundations and the crawl spaces of the houses. So we're trying more and more here at the city to put this back onto the developers in this case, and to have them understand either through their homeowners association, if that's created for these or whatever, that they're going to have to take care of their own drainage. And in the past, it typically has not been the rule of thumb here at the city that one or two of the residential lots were sacrificed to do stormwater on. But more and more, that's what we're seeing nowadays, is because what we're trying to do is we're trying to stiffen up on this rule, and we're trying to get folks to realize when they're coming in with these developments, when the city is being made responsible for all of that extra area that's draining into its system, that's an expense that we're having to foot, that in turn sort of drives up our stormwater utility fees in the long run. And so we're trying to keep those fees down, and in doing so, we're trying to have that sort of infiltration done on site, and a maintenance issue for the actual homeowner or the homeowners association. I'm going to move on here to what we actually saw from the developer, how it was constructed, and what was put in as far as stormwater was concerned. So kind of hard to see here on the slide, but we did have them provide us with a conveyance system through the site. It was an open channel that went from the front of the site, crossed under both of the streets, and then curved around and connected up to the street that was adjacent downstream, and the culvert that was there. All right. These guys chose to put in Uic Infiltration Galleries. In hindsight, if I were the reviewer on this, I would have probably had them put in something different than Uic Galleries. I probably would have gone for a Uic dry well instead. But the decision was made, and it was accepted to use infiltration galleries out here. So we ended up with 20 infiltration galleries that was sized for the 25-year event. So there were 3 systems that were put in down here on Middle Waitsburg to handle runoff from Waitsburg Road. So so all of that was part of the project. I think we got in 48 single family residences in this development, and the proposal came in for a less than 60-foot wide standard right of way. And the reason for that is basically they could have skinnier streets, they could have bigger lots, and that's what the developer was proposing out here. I can tell you from just looking at the report that the lot sizes out here were between, I want to say 9,500 and about 10,800 square feet. So these were regulation lots that were put in. We adjusted our development standards shortly before this development was done, so that we could put in basically the R96 type of development that was typical here. We made it so that our developers could come in and put in smaller lots in their developments, so that they could get more units in, because that's what our council thought was the direction that we needed to go. So smaller lots, possibly a little bit smaller houses, but definitely smaller areas to maintain front yards, backyards, and side yards. So on the next slide here, I just had a little kind of a typical, this is what the typical infiltration system looked like out there. Basically, we had a curb and gutter out in the street. We had a catch basin. We had a infiltration trench that went between a sedimentation manhole on one end and a what we consider to be a 24-inch round catch basin on the other end for cleaning access. So we were able to get these situated in the sidewalk and underneath the sidewalk in most instances out here, so that we were able to maintain our separation distances for all of our other utilities. We did have some crossings of our water mains and some other close calls out here that probably nowadays in this day and time would not have been allowed. But back when this was proposed and constructed, we weren't enforcing those crossings as strictly as we do today. So we try to discourage that as much as possible today, based on what we've heard from Department of Health and Department of Ecology. So the next comment here is usually it's lots used for ponds or roadside swales in my experience. Excellent. Thank you very much. As you can see on this development, they went skinny with the right of way. So we didn't have a landscaped area between the sidewalk and the curb and gutter. In the developments where we have that, we typically do allow for roadside swales to be put in those locations. I will mention this as far as a conflict, in that we've had several subdivisions since this one that have come in and been built, and we've kind of run up against some issues with our development services folks, because in those cases where they proposed roadside swales or even infiltration galleries underneath those landscaped areas, those are not locations where we can come back in and plant street trees on top of those galleries. So it's a small point, but it is something that we found that we've come into conflict with our development services folks. So when we see a development that comes in now that looks like it's gonna be proposing to put infiltration galleries in, and they're going to put them in underneath those landscaped areas, we have to sort of divert them toward the roadside swale concept or a different BMP, because we can't satisfy the development services requirement of having street trees in there and have infiltration galleries under them at the same time, because the two of those just don't mix as far as maintenance is concerned. Okay, next comment. I know you spoke to this already, but I don't see how the natural drainage path was accommodated. I apologize, but can you repeat how you handle that? Yes, I can. So if you'll notice in the screen here, this is the natural drainage path where my arrow is coming down sort of from the west to the east here. It really does not look like much, okay? But how it was accommodated is we required the developer to put a channel through the middle here that basically extended from the west side of the project all the way over to the east side of the project. So we had them size that channel appropriately based off the runoff model of all of the contributing area that was upstream, and asked them to make sure that it was included in their homeowners association agreement, so that it was something that they maintained. It was theirs and theirs to maintain. So that's how we made sure that natural drainage path was taken care of. if I can see, I'll go back here. Go back to this slide here. You can see it maybe a little bit better, but we had them just put a channel right through here, a couple of culverts under each one of these streets to make sure it handled whatever model flow they were going to be expecting through there. Next comment was, does that naturally drain towards the center to the channel? And the answer is yes. So the final grading of the project meant that the north side here and the south side were the two high sides of the project. Both of those drained toward the center. It sort of naturally did that anyway prior to this development, but they adjusted the grading out on the site to make sure that that is what occurred out there. So reasonably flat. I think the grade drop between the high and the low side was about, I believe it's about 8 feet on the north side to the center, and maybe about 6 feet from the south side to the center. So it was pretty naturally occurring drainage that was there. So just a couple of follow-up comments and thoughts here. And I'm not sure how this is handled in your jurisdiction, so it would be interesting to find out. Stabilization of these lots, kind of interesting. So they were required to get a construction stormwater general permit out here based on the size of their development. Ecology made them hold on to their permit for quite a while. And that was based on the fact that the developer came in, he built the houses, and he did some landscaping in the front of the lots, but he did nothing in the back of the lots. Okay, did absolutely nothing. That was left up to the homeowners. So it took a couple of years before all of the backyards were what I would consider to be stabilized. In other words, it took a couple of years for those houses to be purchased. It took a couple of years for them to finish the landscaping in the back, put the sod down, or put the hydro seed down, or put whatever it was that they were putting down to stabilize those lots in the back. That was kind of an issue out here for these sites, because a lot of the neighbors were unhappy because first off, they bought a house that was going to be theirs to finish the landscaping on in the back, and the fact that we had to keep our construction BMPs, or the developer had to keep the construction BMPs in place on these catch basins and these UIC galleries for an extended period of time after the actual construction was done out here. So something to consider for us in the future would consider having discussions with the developers to make sure that their developments are stabilized, completely stabilized, so that they can get out of their stormwater permits sooner rather than later.